What's going on, everyone? It's Ben from YGO from Zero, back with another MRL format video. And in this video, we're going to be discussing a bit more of an aggressive deck than the one that I showed off previously. Magic Ruler introduced a ton of new powerful equip spells, so we're going to be showing off a deck that takes advantage of those. And while the deck list I'm going to show might be a bit unoptimized and have some iffy inclusions, it's my current build for the strategy, and I think it's still very fun. But before we dive into the deck breakdown of the games, if you're not already subscribed to my channel, please be sure to subscribe. We're almost at 360 subscribers. I'd really like to reach 400 by the end of the month. That would be a huge milestone for me and be a great way to start off the new year. In addition, if you're interested in playing these formats like MRL format or any of the other formats I've covered on the channel for yourself, we have a Discord server now. Link will be in the description below. It's a really cool place with a lot of really cool people, and we've played a ton of awesome games testing out this format. And we'll soon be testing out the next format as well. So if you've got any cool deck ideas that you want to try out, that server is the place for you. Lastly, as always, if you enjoy the video, please be sure to leave a like down below. But now that all that's out of the way, let's dive into this deck. So this is basically an equip deck. I have it labeled as Maha because originally I was going to do this as a Maha Vailo deck. But Maha Vailo is a very underwhelming card in my opinion, and it just requires too much investment to actually be worth it. So instead of Maha Vailo, we're playing just some bigger beaters like Jiraiya instead. Now, you could replace these Jiraiya with a Dark Elf. The main reason we're playing Jiraiya is that it can always attack no matter what your life points are at. And in addition, it can get your life points to a low enough threshold that your Megamorphs will likely always be online until you make that big final OTK push in the end. You may see in some of these games, though, that there are situations where you would prefer Dark Elf to Jiraiya, so it's definitely a consideration to make in future iterations of this deck. Maybe even you swap out one Jiraiya for one Dark Elf to search in cases when you need one over the other. But that's the general theory behind the deck. For the card by card, we're playing two Jiraiya, of course, to get a ton of damage on board when combined with things like Megamorph or Acts of Despair. We're also playing one Cannon Soldier to clear away the last bits of our opponent's life points after we make a huge OTK push. This is a staple in almost every deck in the format. We also have 3 Magician of Faith. This can be great at recycling your Power 5 limited spells or any of the equipped spells you have. You can also do interesting setups with cards like Painful Choice as well. I'm kind of iffy on Painful Choice's inclusion in this deck. I think that in general this card's less good in this format than it will eventually become. But we do have it in the deck to mainly serve as a tool late game to sort of get you the exact pieces that you need to actually finish off your opponent, which you may see in the games. So it can also be used with Magician of Faith to great effect. We also have 3 Mystic Tomato. This is a great card in this format. It can fetch out more Mystic Tomatoes from deck, or it can just fetch out one of your many recruiters. Things like Sandgain and Witch, which we're playing 2 copies of each. These can search out important monsters in your deck, and are just all around great cards. A staple in pretty much every deck this format. Lastly, we are playing 3 Mechanical Chaser as well to serve as our more vanilla beaters to just get constant aggressive pressure without potentially having our life points. Yes, you do want to have your life points for the Jiraiya, but it's nice to just have a card that doesn't necessarily have to do that when you don't want it to. For these spells, we are playing a total of 6 equipped spells, 3 Acts of Despair, 3 Megamorph. This is largely to pair with the Painful Choice. If you need an equipped spell at the end of the game, you can send 5 from deck. Doesn't always work out like that, but it is an option. And also, playing these 6 equipped spells means that you'll likely always have at least one at hand to use when you want it to. You can also double up these equipped spells, although I don't think it quite works that way with Megamorph, as if you equip 2 Megamorphs onto a monster, its attack will still just be double or half its original attack. I will also say that I'm pretty sure if you pair an Axe of Despair and a Megamorph together, the monster's attack will just be double the original attack, and the Axe of Despair additional attack value won't get added to it, although I could be very wrong about that. Megamorph is a very weird card, so I'm not quite sure all its rulings, but definitely let me know down in the comments below whether that's correct or not. We also, of course, are playing the Power 5 limited spells, 1 Change of Heart, 1 Dark Hole, 1 Monster Reborn, 1 Pot of Greed, 1 Raigeki, all insanely strong. For our spell and trap removal, we are playing 3 Mystical Space Typhoon as a way to just clear our opponent's back row, potentially snipe Bokus during our opponent's turn to enable us to make a big aggressive push. I think in an aggressive deck like this, Mystical Space Typhoon is actually better than Heavy Storm, precisely for this reason. You can also deal with if your opponent tries to Snatch Steal one of your monsters, and Snatch Steal is at 3 in this format, so this is quite a big threat. We are also playing the 3 Painful Choice for the reasons that I mentioned before, and 3 Snatch Steal. In an aggressive deck like this, you want to be able to get as aggressive as possible, so these can be good at sort of taking your opponent's powerful monsters and using them to make a huge aggressive push. For the traps, we've got 1 Mirror Force, just as a way to clear our opponent's aggressive threats and clear the way for our own monsters to attack in. And we're also playing 3 Solemn Judgment. Just like with Jirai Gumo, you kind of want to be having your life points, so that way you're down to a low enough threshold where Megamorph will be live. So Solemn is good in that regard. It's also a very controlling card, which can stop some of your opponent's most powerful spell cards, and in this format there are a lot of those. Now, one thing that you may notice about the main deck, and the side deck for that matter, is that we're not actually playing any hand drip cards, which I think is definitely a place where you can change things around in the future. I think honestly you could probably cut the Act of Despairs for some hand rips instead. Act of Despair does have its uses, as you may see in the games coming up, but I think overall the hand rips are generally more powerful, and playing a deck completely without hand rips is a bit risky. But this is how we've built the deck, and I think the deck is aggressive enough that you don't necessarily need to be depleting your opponent's cards from hand. However, they are just very powerful cards, and you could definitely include them here, especially as in this format it's not necessarily as bad to go above 40 cards, as Mill is a decent threat in the format, and there are so many powerful cards that you don't really need to cut for space. But now that we've discussed the main deck, let's talk about the side deck. We're on 3 Maneater Bug in case we want a bit more removal. This can be very, very good at dealing with opponent's set monsters, especially when our opponent's on a mill or burn strategy. We have 3 Fisher if we need even more removal. 3 Giant Trunade if we want more spell and trap removal. Same thing with the 2 Heavy Storm in the side deck as well. We have 1 Tribute to the Doomed in case we are up against a stall strategy that plays a lot of flip monsters, which many of them do. And we're also on 3 Wuboku in case we're against a similarly aggressive deck. I think this deck definitely has some problems, and other people have been optimizing decks similar to this in the format to better success than I probably have. But I still think it's an interesting list and an interesting deck idea that I do want to show off as a potential avenue to explore if you do test out this format for yourself. So with that out of the way, let's dive into some games. Okay, we've got a game against Gabibo Balandi, who this is their first time appearing on the YouTube channel, I'm pretty sure, but they've been very active in the YGO from Zero Discord, and they've been one of the key players testing out this format and really doing some optimization for it. So exciting to feature them on the channel. We're playing the Aggro Equip deck that I just showed off. Unclear what they're playing, but we'll have to find out. We're going to start off with a pretty intense rock, paper, scissors battle here, as going first in this format is very important at playing around your opponent's hand rips, and neither of us is giving an inch here until I throw a paper and they counteract my play with a scissors. Masterful rock, paper, scissoring on their part. So we are going to be going second here, which is a bit unfortunate, but we just gotta hope that they don't draw any good hand rips here. They're just going to set one, set another, pass back to us, which indicates to us that they didn't actually draw any hand rips, which is very, very good for us. Let's see what we do here. We don't really have the means to go too aggressive yet. Megamorph isn't the best just yet. We could Painful for something, but I don't really think it's necessary right now. We might as well save that for later when it can be more impactful. So what we're going to do here is just set a Witch, set in Mystical Space Typhoon, and set the Painful. We don't really care as much if the Painful gets destroyed, if they have like a Mystical Space Typhoon or a Heavy. And we know that they don't have multiple hand rips in hand because they didn't use them last turn. So if they do draw like a Duo or a Forceful, then we'll at least still have at least one card in hand. So passing back to them, they are going to activate Painful Choice here, and it looks like they're going to go for a hand rip. Now, they sent 3 Duo and 2 Comfy, and so each of these have that 1,000 cost related to them. I guess we have to just decide whether we care about them having hand knowledge or whether we care about them discarding more cards from hand. And I think we don't really care too much about them knowing what this hand is. Solemn and Megamorph both aren't the best right now, and they can play around Snatch Steal, but they'll probably discard Snatch Steal, as it is the most powerful card in our hand. So we're going to let them have the Confiscation, and they are going to Trunade away our back row. That is a bit more worrying. They will be able to know a bit more about what we have set, and they will be able to potentially confiscation a more powerful card. But I feel like there's likely still going to take the Snatch Steal here, and it looks like they do. So we still have our MST for later, and they will Change of Heart our set. It's just our Witch, so they won't be able to get a flip effect off, but they will be able to get a ton of damage in here. And unfortunately, they do have White Magical Hat, so it seems like they're going a bit more all in on the hand control aspects of this format, playing, in addition to the hand rips, some monsters that can hand rip as well. So this will be quite unfortunate. There aren't any like super powerful hits that they can take here, so it's not the worst thing in the world, but it's still a lot of damage and a discard. It's kind of unfortunate. They do take the Megamorph there, which honestly would have been nice here, as we are now lower than our opponent in terms of life points. But it's still not the worst. We draw a Mystic Tomato, which actually lets us do a pretty interesting play here. We'll start by just crashing the Mystic Tomatoes together, and because they are not turn player, they have to search first, so we can then tailor our searches to what they bring out. So we are going to bring out another Mystic Tomato since they brought out one of their own. We'll crash again, bring out 2 more Mystic Tomatoes, and likely crash them again, and that is indeed what we're going to do here. So those Mystic Tomatoes will die. They'll bring out a Witch, and then I think because of that, we could bring out like a Cannon Soldier just to beat over the Witch. But since they will get a search here, I think that we just want to actually get a search ourselves. So we'll bring out our own copy of Witch as well. Attack one of our Witches into the White Magical Hat, and then attack the other into their Witch. So they will search first because they are not turn player. They grab a Magician of Faith, which can be pretty worrying given that they do have some very powerful cards in grave. We're going to think about what we want to get in response, but we're just going to go a bit aggressive. We're going to get a Mechanical Chaser. And then main phase 2, we're just going to set the Solemn, set a Mystical Space Typhoon, pass back to them. We can always Solemn Judgment the Magician of Faith if they do flip it up, or Solemn Judgment whatever spell they add back to hand. They're going to activate Painful Choice here, and they're going to send Forceful, Forceful, Heavy, True Nade, Forceful. Now, this is a bit of an interesting choice. If they Forceful, they are likely going to take the Mechanical Chaser, but we can just search out another with the Witch. And if they add a heavier True Nade, then they can turn our Solemn offline for when we want the Magician of Faith. So I think actually we should give them a Forceful here. We don't, however, we just give them a True Nade instead, figuring that at least the cards will go back to our hand and not completely be dead, but I think that's the wrong move here. They're going to set one, pass back to us. We draw a Mystical Space Typhoon, which won't quite help us if that is a Magician of Faith, but we're just going to get aggressive here. We're going to attack him with the Witch first. If it is a Magician of Faith, this lets us get more damage in, and unfortunately it is. They're going to think about what they want to get, and they're just going to get a Confiscation, which actually we are a lot more fine with, although they do have the True Nade for our back row. At least there isn't a majorly powerful card in our hand that they can get rid of with the Confi, and they are dropping down another 1,000. So not the worst thing for us. They're going to activate True Nade. We are going to add the cards back to hand. We're not going to activate Solemn on that. There's no real point to. They're going to Raigeki our board away. That is very unfortunate. We will get a search here with the Witch, but they are likely just going to Confi that. And they do Confi. They will indeed take the Gumo. And that makes it very unfortunate for us. They're going to bring out a Mechanical Chaser and attack in here for 1850. We are down to 2650, which is very worrying, but we do draw a Monster Reborn. So we could potentially Painful Choice our way out of this. Unclear exactly what would do it. If we send 3 Snatch Steal and a Change of Heart, that almost gets us there because we can take control of their Mechanical Chaser, Reborn our Gumo, and attack in that way. I'm trying to think if there's anything else that we can do there as well. If we just get a Cannon Soldier, Reborn, Gumo, attack in, then that's 1750 and then minus 1,000. That's not quite there. I don't know. It's a bit iffy. We're going to think about this, think about whether we do have the Painful Choice line or not. And we are going to go for it. Let's see what we get here. We're going to send Snatch Steal, Change of Heart, Cannon Soldier, Snatch Steal, Gumo. That's interesting. Oh, I guess one of our Snatch Steals is already in grave. So we couldn't actually do 4 cards that take control of their monsters. I think we could potentially be in a good spot here either way. They're going to give us the Cannon Soldier, and honestly, that's one of the better cards they could have given us. And so we're just going to summon out the Cannon Soldier, Reborn, the Gumo, and just attack in here. So we're going to call heads. Hopefully we get it right. Honestly, at this point, probably doesn't matter. But we do get it right. so we don't have to pay half, and we're just going to attack in with the Cannon Soldier. Main 2, we're actually just going to set our entire hand, and just hope that this is enough. We do have the Solemn Judgment for one of the cards that they will activate or play next turn. We just gotta hope that their other card isn't anything good. They are going to activate Snatch Steal. We're just going to immediately Mystical Space Typhoon that, just stop them from getting our monster, and then we feel very good here as we can just sell them whatever else they have. If they set their monster, that's also fine. We can likely attack over it with a Gumo, and then attack in with Cannon Soldier, tribute away our entire board, and that will be the game as well. They're going to Reborn here, and we just have the Solemn for that, so that will be the end of the game. And this sort of gets at what I meant when I said that Painful Choice can be very important at wrapping up game states at the very end of the game. With Painful Choice, we were able to give our opponent a truly painful choice, sending some cards that would just win us the game immediately, and other cards that would win us the game basically in 2 turns. And they didn't really have a good choice there. Every card that they could give us would allow us to basically win the game unless they got very lucky. But it was good enough to let us win this game. And that's why I do like Painful in the deck, even though it's not the best card in this format. For an aggressive deck like this, it can be very useful. But that's going to be game 1. And going into game 2, I don't really think we make too many changes. It's not like we have hand rips to side out. And it seems like they're on a pretty standard deck. So we're just going to keep things the same. Let's see if our opponent mixes things up a little bit. They're going to Forceful Sentry, so we will be forced to send back a Witch here. Very good pick on their part. And they're just going to set 2, pass back to us, and Painful Choice is interesting, but I don't think we really need to use it yet. We're just going to summon out the Sandgate, attack into their set, and unfortunately it is a Mystic Tomato. We're just going to set the Mystical Space Typhoon, set a Painful Choice, pass back to them. If they do draw a Duo, that's really bad for us, but we do have the Sandgate to search something out potentially. So it's not the worst for us. They're just going to set another pass back to us. We draw a Solemn, which is pretty nice. We're just going to attack in with a Sandgate into their Mystic Tomato. And unfortunately it is a Mystic Tomato, so we won't be able to clear it. We're just going to set a Mystic Tomato of our own, set a Solemn in case they have like a board clear or something, pass back to them. They're going to Pot of Greed, that's pretty good. They're going to draw 2 here, and they're just going to set another pass back to us. We draw Megamorph, and while our life points are below our opponents, there's no real need to activate this yet. We're going to flip up the Mystic Tomato, switch our Sandgan to defense to play around something like a Mirror Force, and attack into their set. Unfortunately, that will enable them to get back Pot of Greed, as their set was a Magician of Faith. But we'll just have to pass back to them. Hopefully we can draw something to deal with these tomatoes on board next turn. They're going to Pot of Greed here, draw 2, and they're just going to set another pass back to us. We draw another Mystical Space Typhoon, no real reason to commit that to board. Unfortunately, they do have another Magician of Faith, so they will be able to get back the Pot of Greed, and they are drawing a lot of cards off our pot. We're going to set the Mystical Space Typhoon, pass back to them, they activate Pot of Greed. They're going to draw 2 more. It's very likely we're not winning this game, given how much card advantage they have now. They will snipe our Solemn Judgment here, which is very unfortunate, especially when they followed up with a Heavy Storm. We could have Solemned that if Solemn was still on the field. Debatable whether we would have, but either way, we didn't have the choice here. They will switch the tomatoes to attack, summon out a 3rd tomato, and then Snatch Steal our last tomato. And we don't have the Mystical Space Typhoon anymore to deal with that. This is very unfortunate for us. They're going to attack into our Sandgan, and then we are going to just search out a Mystic Tomato, as we can potentially attack into our Mystic Tomato and get 2 monsters on board. But this is a very bad situation here. So we're going to take 4,200 from this attack, not 5,200 like I initially think. But we do gain 1,000 next turn, so that's not the worst, but it's still in a very rough spot. We draw a Snatch Steal of our own. It's a bit risky to use it now, though, so we're just going to summon out the Mystic Tomato, try attacking into our Mystic Tomato to get a monster. Unfortunately, they have a Mirror Force, so we won't be able to deal with that. Instead, we're just going to Snatch Steal our Mystic Tomato. And we set the Megamorph here. I think, honestly, we could have actually activated the Megamorph and equipped it to our Mystic Tomato to make it a monster that they just couldn't crash into. But if we had done that, they could have maneuvered a way to get their life points lower than ours by crashing their Mystic Tomatoes into ours and then being able to beat over that. So I think it's okay to save it here, but I don't think it's necessarily the right move. And they will gain their 1,000 from the Snatch Steal. And they're going to bring out a Shining Angel, which reveals that they are also on Light Recruiters as well, likely to bring out something like White Magical Hat, which can be pretty bad for us here, as if they crash their Shining Angel into our Mystic Tomato, bring out White Magical Hat, and then crash their Mystic Tomatoes into whatever we bring out, then they will be able to discard the Gumo from our hand here. Very unfortunate. Unfortunately for them, they don't do that yet. We are going to bring out a Mystic Tomato here, though. So it looks like they will have the opportunity to now, and it looks like they are going to do that. And we are in a very rough spot here. We're going to bring out a Witch. They bring out a White Magical Hat. But I do think that this is just potentially the end of the game. I think we may survive with like 800 life points left, but this is very rough. At least we'll still have one card left in hand after this White Magical Hat push, but it's not looking good for us. They do discard the Magician of Faith, so that's a bit better, as if we had just set the Magician of Faith, then we would just lose next turn. But it's still not looking good, given how many more cards they have than us. We draw Dark Hole, though, which is probably one of the best draws we could get here. We're going to activate Dark Hole, clear their entire board. They will get a search off the Witch, but it's honestly not the worst. We're going to bring out a Jiraigumo, activate Megamorph, because we might as well, and try and get in for 4,400. And we do call the coin toss right, so we're not dropping down to 400. We'll pass back to them. They have a Dark Hole, so they do have a way to deal with our monster, and that is just the end of the game. Once they activated the Pot of Greed multiple times, it was very unlikely that we were winning that, especially as we don't actually have any hand rips in our deck, which I think that game really shows one of the flaws when you don't have hand rips in your deck. The hand rip cards are just so powerful at stemming any advantage that your opponent can get. And so I think we really should include them in future iterations of this deck. And I know that other people experimenting with this deck have managed to find ways to fit them in, much to those decks' benefit. But that's going to be game 1 there. Going into game 3, we are tied 1-1, but we will be able to go first, which is a bit more advantageous for us. This is a pretty killer hand, but we've got to decide whether we want to play around the hand rips or things like heavy. Given that they have so many hand rips, I think we probably should play around the hand rips, and we do. We set 3 and set the Witch, pass back to them. If they do have a heavy, then we're kind of screwed by this, but if they don't, we're feeling pretty good, and it looks like they might not. They're going to summon out Mystic Tomato, crash into our Witch of the Black Forest here, and we need to think about what we want to get. We're going to get a Jiraigumo as a big beater here. They're just going to set 1, pass back to us, and we could get very aggressive here. We're going to Mystical Space Typhoon that back row. It is Rush Recklessly, so they will just chain it to get their Mystic Tomato up high. Luckily for us, that is actually beneficial. We're going to bring out Jiraigumo, Snatch Steal their Mystic Tomato, and attack in for 4,300, which is quite a lot. So we will flip a coin here. Let's see if we drop down to half our life points. And it looks like we will. We do call the toss wrong. But we're still on relatively even footing with the life points, and I think honestly it benefits us more to be at this low life point total as we do have the Waboku set. So we're just going to pass back to them. They do gain 1,000 here, which does turn our Megamorphs on, which is nice. They're going to Pot of Greed here, draw 2, and they have a Mystical Space Typhoon. They're not actually going to target the Snatch Steal, instead targeting our middle set. Very lucky that they picked this over the Raigeki, as we can chain that Waboku and make it so that we don't suffer battle damage this turn. They're going to activate a Sword Revealing Light here, set 1, pass back to us. Unfortunately, we don't have a good way to deal with that swords yet, so our opponent is just going to spend a couple turns increasing life points off of our Snatch Steal, which is quite unfortunate. We're going to just Raigeki that set monster in case it's something like a Magician of Faith. It is a Shining Angel, though. Still a good Raigeki, in my opinion, as we don't want them to be able to bring out another monster by destroying their monster by battle. We're just going to set the Magician of Faith, set a Waboku, pass back to them. If they do have Change of Heart to take the Magician of Faith, that could be very unfortunate for us. But if they don't, we can potentially get back the Raigeki or the Mystical Space Typhoon to get a bit more aggressive here. They will Dark Hole the board away. They do gain the 1,000 for the Snatch Steal before that happens, though. So it's quite unfortunate for us, and they will just pass back to us. Shengen isn't a bad draw. We'll just set that, pass back to them. And they will Change of Heart our Sangan, which is very nice. Glad they didn't have the Change of Heart last turn to take our Magician of Faith. But they will be able to switch up the Sangan and attack in. That's honestly fine. We'll take that. We still get the Sangan back. You can switch it to defense. So we're just going to switch the Sangan to defense, set another Sangan, and pass back to them. If they do have a board clear here, then we're fine with that as we get 2 searches. If they don't, then we have 2 monsters on board to attack in with later. We're going to pass back to them. Swords is finally gone, so we'll finally be able to get back to attacking next turn. And they activate Messenger of Peace, which is an interesting card. I think that they probably side decked that in, given that we're on a more aggressive strategy. It will shut down our Mechanical Chaser here, but I don't think we're the most worried about that, especially when we draw a Cannon Soldier to follow up. We check their graveyard, see that they have used up 1 Dark Hole, so the only real board clear they have left is a Raigeki. And if they do Raigeki our board, we get 2 Sangan searches off of that, so we're not too torn up about that. So we're actually going to just bring out the Cannon Soldier, switch everything to attack, and attack in. We attack in with Sangan first, as we figure we can get over pretty much anything. And if it's Mystic Tomato, we don't necessarily want to get rid of it. So we're just going to attack in, and luckily we do get over it. It looks like he's an Electric Snake, which is great, because if they're on Electric Snakes, they're going to get super punished because we're not actually on any Delinquent Duos. So the Electric Snakes will be dead in their hand if they have them in. We will then attack for 1,014. And then main phase 2, we could tribute off all our field if we wanted to. But I think we don't want to do that. We don't want to lose our entire offensive pressure here. So what we're going to do instead is just tribute off 1 Sangan. Get a Man-Eater Bug just in case they have any other monsters that they want to bring out that can give us difficulty. And then we're just going to pass back to them. This way, if they have a Raigeki, at least we do get 500 damage in. And our board is still pretty insulated here. They're going to let the Messenger Piece expire and then activate a Snatch Steal targeting Cannon Soldier. That's pretty bad for us, as they can just tribute off the Cannon Soldier in main phase 2. We will at least get a search here, and we're going to search out a Witch of the Black Forest. Makes sense. They're going to tribute off that Cannon Soldier, cost us 500. And we draw Solemn Judgment, which is very good at this point in the game. We're going to attack in for 1850, drop them down to 950, set a Solemn, pass back to them. We've just got to hope that they don't really have a good way to stop us here. And they do have swords, which we are actually going to Solemn, as we just need to keep that aggressive pressure going. This could potentially come back to bite us, as we are at a very low amount now. But I think it's worth doing, as we do have the upper hand, in my opinion. We also have a Woboku set, so if they do try and make an aggressive push, we can just Woboku that. Looks like they're just going to set 1 Activate Messenger of Peace, which is very unfortunate. But if we do draw a sort of spell and trap removal card, then I think we do just win the game here. We draw Magician of Faith instead, though. Kind of unfortunate, but we are just going to set the Man-Eater Bug here, pass back to them. Hopefully flip it up, pop whatever monster they have set next turn, and then bring out the Witch to attack in for a ton of damage. Also, as a note, they do have to pay 100 life points during each of their standby phases if they want to keep Messenger of Peace on the field. And they are at a very low amount already. So this will just drop them down lower. So hopefully that will come up. It looks like they're going to flip up the Electric Snake, attack into our set, and we will just pop the Electric Snake. Main 2, they're just going to set 1, pass back to us. I don't think that they actually paid the 100 for the Messenger, but I don't think it will actually matter here in the end. They will trap hole our Witch, so we'll just search out a Mystic Tomato, pass back to them. Let's see if they can draw what they need to get out of this situation. Looks like they did not. They're just going to pay another 100 with Messenger, set 1, pass back to us. And we do actually draw Reborn, which just is the end of the game here. We can just Reborn a Cannon Soldier and tribute away our board. So that will be the last 1,000. But that, in my opinion, was a very good game. And I think it really showed off some of the strengths of this sort of aggro equip deck. Now, I think it also showed off some of its weaknesses. Like, it's very easy to side against with things like Messenger of Peace. And also, it's not playing any hand rips, so it can't really deal with if your opponent gets a ton of advantage. But I think that some of those problems can be ironed out in future iterations of the deck. Now, for some games that really show off some of the deck's major flaws in a clearer way, in my opinion, let's dive into the next match I have prepared. Okay, we've got a game here against Wick, who is also an MRL player on the Discord. So if you want to play games against me or against any of these people, definitely check out the Discord link down below and join. We're happy to have you, happy to play. But this should be a pretty good one. We're on aggro. Unclear what our opponent is on, but let's see how it goes. We do actually win the rock, paper, scissors here, so that is very nice for us. And we will go first here. This is a decent opening hand. we have a ton of monsters, and we do have one of our equip spells if we need to use it. We're just going to start by setting a witch, setting 2, passing back to them. If they've got heavy, we get kind of punished by this, and especially if they've got heavy, duo, and forceful or comfy. But we're feeling decent about this otherwise. They will actually activate a forceful here, so they will be able to take away our Jirai Gumo, which is a bit unfortunate. It's a major aggressive presence early in the game, and now we don't have it. Then they're going to activate Confiscation, which is a little bit more unfortunate, as they'll be able to take away our Magician of Faith and deprive us of getting back a spell card later. They're just going to set 1, pass back to us, and we're just going to bring out a Mystic Tomato, attack into their set, try and get in some damage here. It is a Cyber Jar, unfortunately, so we will lose out our Mystic Tomato recruitment, but hopefully we get something good off the Cyber Jar. We are going to get all spells, no monsters. Oh, we do have 1 trap, but still, that's quite unfortunate. They managed to get 2 monsters of their own. This is a bit rough. So they will be able to add a Fissure, a Dark Hole, and a Reborn to hand, which are all very good cards that we have no real way of dealing with. And they do have another Cyber Jar activation on field. We will at least get a Mirror Force and a Raigeki, and also Change of Heart, which is very good, Megamorph, and Painful Choice, all of which are decent cards, but not really at this point in the game. We gotta think about what we want to do here, because we could potentially Change of Heart that Cyber Jar, flip it up again, and hopefully draw into something a bit better here. I don't think that's really worth it, especially as we don't have hand rip cards though. So what we are going to do is we're just going to Raigeki away their board. We are then going to set the Mirror Force, pass back to them. If they've got more hand rips, that's kind of unfortunate. And if they've got heavy, that's kind of unfortunate. But they didn't heavy us before, so I think they'd have to draw heavy off the top here to get that. Oh, we do also have a Witch Search from last turn because the Witch did die, and that is mandatory, so we add the Witch to hand. Wouldn't have changed anything last turn as we had already used up our normal summon, but it's good to know. They're going to bring out the Mechanical Chaser attack in here for 1850, quite unfortunate. And they're going to just set 2, pass back to us. Looks like, oh, they already normal summon this turn, so they won't be able to do that. We are going to summon out a Witch of our own. And we could potentially activate Megamorph to allow it to get over the Mechanical Chaser, but we're going to get a bit more aggressive here. We're going to Snatch Steal away their Mechanical Chaser, attack in for 2950. Yes, they will gain 1,000 after this, but I think it's good to just try and keep the offensive up as much as possible. We'll pass back to them, and they will gain their 1,000 from the Snatch Steal. They're going to Pot of Greed, drawing 2. Let's hope they don't draw a Heavy Storm here. They draw a Forceful, so they will be able to see our hand, and they will be able to send back the Change of Heart, which we really wanted to use to keep the aggressive pressure going next turn if they brought out an additional monster. Unfortunately, we will lose that, and they will activate Dark Hole, clearing away the entire board here. We'll be able to get a search off the Witch, so we're just going to search a Sangan. It's a pretty good card. They're going to set 1, pass back to us. We draw a Snatch Steal, which is pretty decent, but we're just going to bring out the Sangan and try attacking in. If it's another Cyber Jar, then we get a search off this and can potentially get more aggressive pressure on board here. Unfortunately for us, it's not a Cyber Jar, it's a Magician of Faith, so they will be able to add the Pot of Greed to hand. And we'll just have to pass back to them. They're going to get a ton of advantage here, drawing 2 more with the Pot of Greed. And let's see what they do. They're going to bring out a Witch of the Black Forest to beat over our Sangan. Quite unfortunate, but nothing much we can really do here. We're going to add a Mystic Tomato in hand. And main 2, they're just going to pass back to us. So this is good because we can potentially bring out the Mystic Tomato next turn and hit over the Witch. And that is just what we are going to do. We're going to summon out Mystic Tomato, attack over that Witch. They will get a search here, which is a bit unfortunate, and it's especially unfortunate when it's a Magician of Faith. But I don't feel the worst about that. At least we can beat over the Magician of Faith and get in a ton of damage next turn, potentially. They're going to bring out a Sangan, and maybe they're getting a search off here. Oh, it's just a Fissure. So they will be able to clear our Mystic Tomato. Attack in for 1,000 here. Kind of unfortunate. We do have the Snatch Steal to take the Sangan if we want to get even more aggressive, but I don't really think it's worth it. We're going to try Mystical Space Typhooning their set, and we get majorly lucky there. It is a Raigeki, so we will be able to take that off the field here. And we draw a 3rd Megamorph, which is not what we want to see right now. I think that this isn't the worst, though. It could be good later if we're on the back foot. It's kind of tricky what we want to do here. We are just going to summon a Cannon Soldier, Snatch Steal the Sangan, and get in 24. Main phase 2, we can then tribute off the Sangan, and deal an additional 500. I don't think there was any way to wrap the game up that turn with the painful choice, although if there was, definitely let me know down in the comments below. But I think this was the best play otherwise. They're going to add a Cyber Jar to hand, which is quite unfortunate as that does kind of deal with our Cannon Soldier here. And they're going to Change of Heart the Cannon Soldier, so that deals with it a little bit more. They're going to tribute out a Summoned Skull, which is super interesting. I think there's definitely a deck that you could make in this format where you're just playing a bunch of tribute monsters like Summoned Skull, utilizing things like Snatch Steal and Change of Heart, as Snatch Steal is at 3 copies and is a very powerful card. Unclear exactly how good that deck is, or whether they're even going all in on that deck or just playing one Summoned Skull in the main to capitalize on the Snatch Steals. But it definitely is an interesting strategy, and we will get a little bit punished here. We will take 2,500, and that's very unfortunate as we're not below their life points. These Megamorphs in hand will be pretty useless for us here. If we were playing a Dark Elf instead of the Jiraigumo here, I think we could have manipulated the game state to a point where we could actually win from this position, as we could equip our Dark Elf with Megamorph, attack in, pay 1,000, and then get it up to 1,500. And we could just painful choice a card to finish off the game that way. But as is, we are playing Jiraigumo, and I do think Jiraigumo is the better choice in general, as being able to attack whenever is very important. And in many situations, you want the halving more than you want the 1,000 to get yourself low enough where Megamorph is useful. But unfortunately, we don't have the Dark Elf, we just have the Jiraigumo. We are going to try to painful choice here, as I do think there are a lot of cards that do enable us to win from this position. So let's see if we manage to get one. We're going to get a Dark Hole, a Change of Heart, a Snatch Steal, a Reborn, and this last card's a bit of a thinker, a Mechanical Chaser. So in the case of any of the previous 4, any of them will win us the game, as they are only at 1850. So if we can clear their monster away, summon a Jiraigumo, we will be able to win the game from that position. If they don't give us any of the cards that enable us to win the game, we can always summon out Mechanical Chaser, equip their Summon Skull with a Megamorph to have it, and get in some damage that way. But as is, 4 of these cards do win us the game, so we're hoping our opponent gives us one of those 4. And it looks like they will think about it a little bit, as it is a very painful choice, and they'll give us back Reborn, which will enable us to win the game here. So we will grab back the Reborn here, and summon a Jiraigumo, Reborn out a Cannon Soldier, then activate Megamorph, equipping it to their Summoned Skull, dropping it down to 1250, and that will just be the end of the game. Now, if we didn't have the painful, we could have taken a bit of a gamble there, summoning out Jiraigumo and potentially equipping it with Megamorph, just hoping that we called the coin toss wrong to have our own life points, and boosting our Jiraigumo up to 4,400, which would actually be a lethal amount of damage on this board. But it was a bit of a gamble, so we didn't go for that, and the painful choice was a lot safer. But I hope that that first game did show some of the flaws with this current build of the deck. Megamorphs and just the equipped spells in general can be big bricks in the wrong circumstances, and sometimes the lack of finesse that you have with Jiraigumo can come back to bite you quite a bit. I still like Jiraigumo better than Dark Elf on the whole, but it's a perfectly valid option to swap out if you are worried about these sort of niche scenarios. But we did manage to win that game either way, so we are going to go into game 2 here. I think we might have sided in some Man-Eaters or Fishers, given that we did see the Summoned Skull game 1, but unclear. I wish Dueling Book actually enabled you to see the siding in these replays. Unfortunately, they did not. So they're just going to set 2, pass back to us. We're just going to set 2, pass back to them. They're going to Mystical Space Typhoon, our Mystical Space Typhoon, and we are perfectly fine with that. They are going to tribute over their Sangan for a Summoned Skull, so they will be able to get a search off this. But luckily we have multiple ways to deal with that Summoned Skull. They're going to attack into our Sangan here. We get a search off of that. We're going to grab a Cannon Soldier to pair very well with the Change of Heart. They're going to set 1, pass back to us. We draw a Megamorph. Megamorph's bricking already. We're going to bring out a Cannon Soldier here, Change of Heart, their monster, and attack in for hopefully 3,900. They do have Wuboku, so this will cut off our offensive push a little bit, but we will be able to tribute off that Summoned Skull for the Cannon Soldier effect, and then we'll just set a Megamorph as a bluff. They are going to activate Confiscation to see our hand, and they will likely take the Witch, as that is a recruiter, and if they can just deal with the Cannon Soldier, then we're cut off from monsters for a while. So I think this is a smart choice. They are going to bring out a Witch of their own, And let's see what they do here to deal with the Cannon Soldier. They are going to Snatch Steal the Cannon Soldier. Very unfortunate for us. They can just tribute that off in main phase 2 and get in a ton of damage in the meanwhile. They are indeed going to do that. We're down to 5,000. But luckily, at least our Megamorph is online, right? We're going to set a Mirror Force pass pack to them. And let's see what they do here. They're going to Forceful. See the same cards that they saw before, basically. Send the Dark Hole back into our deck and attack in for 1,100 here. We'll drop down to 3,900, and they're just going to set one pass back to us. This is very unfortunate if that set card is like a Magician of Faith that can get back something potentially pretty powerful. And we don't really have a way to stop that. We're just going to set the Act of Despair that we just drew and see what they do. They are going to Magician of Faith here, grab back a Forceful Sentry to send the last card back to our deck. It's just the Megamorph that we've been showing them for the past 3 hand rips. So it's no surprise to them, probably. They're going to attack in for 14, pass back to us. We draw Sandgam, which can be pretty good. We can attack over that Magician of Faith there. Deal 700, pass back to them. Hopefully they won't have too many ways to deal with this, because we do want to get our search with the Sandgam. If they do have like Snatch Steal or something, we do have Mirror Force, which will let them get a search, but will also let us get the search off the Sandgam. So they're just going to bring out another Witch. And it looks like they do have the Snatch Steal here, so we'll be able to Mirror Force here, popping our own Sandgam to get the search off, and also not losing, as, you know, that was lethal damage on board, so it's a good thing that we had the Mirror Force set. We're just going to search out a Witch. They're going to search out a Mechanical Chaser and a Cyber Jar, but since they normal summoned this turn already, they can't do anything about that. We draw a Mechanical Chaser of our own. We're just going to bring out the Witch, though. And we are going to equip it with Megamorph here, as a Witch attack with Megamorph will actually not drop them down below our life points. So we still have a monster that can withstand their Mechanical Chaser. And also if they do set the Cyber Jar here, then we're perfectly fine with that, as we will get a search off the Witch. So I think this is pretty good all around. They are going to think about this for a bit, and then they're just going to activate Reborn. Let's see what they bring back. They bring back the Summoned Skull here. And they will just attack into our Witch, so we will take 300 there, as it's not bigger than 2,500 attack. Let's see what we search out. We're going to search out the Jiragumo. That makes sense. With the Act of Despair, that can get over their Summoned Skull. So I think that's a pretty good option there. They're going to set one pass back to us, and we draw a Mystic Tomato, which isn't the best here. But figuring that that is a Cyber Jar, we're just going to attack into it with a Mechanical Chaser. And luckily, we are right. So we will be able to replenish our resources a little bit here. Unfortunately, our opponent will get to do so as well. So it looks like our opponent will be able to bring out a Man-Eater Bug and a Mechanical Chaser and have a duo on top of that to pick apart our hand on the following turn. We at least get the Raigeki and the Dark Hole and a ton of monsters to attack in with, but I'm not sure whether we've got the better position or not here. So they are going to set the Man-Eater Bug and add the spells to hand. Probably summon out the Mechanical Chaser in attack mode, I think. That's what makes the most sense to me. Yep, they are going to do that indeed. And we actually are going to do something a bit interesting here. Because we want the Magician of Faith to go off, and we don't want them to Snatch Steal our Mechanical Chaser, we're actually going to set all of our monsters. Add the Dark Hole and Raigeki to hand. And I think we are just going to Raigeki their board away. And then set the Dark Hole, set a Mystic Tomato, because we are playing around the duo here. If they've got a board clear like Raigeki or Dark Hole, then we do get pretty punished for this, but we're feeling pretty good about this move otherwise. They're going to bring out a Mechanical Chaser, and they will unfortunately activate Raigeki, which is going to be very, very brutal for us. We will drop down to 350 after this attack, and they will just duo out the last card in our hand. So very unfortunate, not much we can draw here that's very good. We draw Mechanical Chaser, which is okay. We Dark Hole their Mechanical Chaser, summon out our Mechanical Chaser, and equip it with Acts of Despair. So actually that will be the end of the game if they've got nothing to stop this. And it looks like they don't. So, okay, we managed to get through that one by the skin of our teeth. Very, very rough game. And I think this really does show some of the major flaws in this deck. I think if the Cyber Jars hadn't been so kind to us, then we might not have been able to get back into this game, which does lend credence to the people who don't like playing Cyber Jars in their deck, as it can benefit the opponent as well as yourself. So, very rough games here, but I hope this does show that this deck can win games and can be pretty fun to play. I had a great time playing this deck and just getting as aggressive as possible, and trying to whittle down my opponent's life points while also whittling down my own to get the Megamorphs online. And I think some of the painful choice activations at the end of the game to close it out were kind of like nice puzzles to try to solve. And while that's not unique to this deck, other decks can play painful choice as well. It definitely works best in this deck in my opinion. But that's going to do it for the video as a whole. What do you think of this deck? Do you have any suggestions to change it up? Where do you think this deck lies in sort of the tier system for this format? Do you think it's tier 1 or do you think it's tier 2 or below? Definitely let me know down in the comments below. But until next time, I've been Ben from YGO from Zero, and I'm signing off.